You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
All right, Blues fans, welcome in. We are here for episode number 21, the Patrick Berglund episode. Patrick Berglund, he was never really one that was a huge point producer, but definitely, spent 10 years here in St. Louis, 694 games, 322 points. I don't think I really could have gone much else here other than Tyler Bozak here with the podcast dedication, but this one here is for Patrick Berglund. We are going to be continuing our Central Division Summer Series here with Brooke LoFurno as we break down the Blues and the Blackhawks and we preview them. So, Brooke, thank you so much here for coming in here. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I know we got a lot to discuss with the Blues and the Hawks.
Oh, man. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a lot easier for me to discuss it here from my point of view as opposed to your point of view. So
I agree.
Yeah. So before we get into it, listeners, I just wanted to thank you here so much. Just a reminder to be able to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode here with us. Give us a review here if you love what we're doing. Be able to give us a comment. If you have some constructive criticism, feel free to be able to give it. If you hate what we're doing, feel free to be able to give that here too. If you are on Twitter, get involved in the conversation over at TBN Pod. Be sure to be able to follow us here on our personal accounts at Ethan Carter SW, and I'm over at M_Meyer3 to chat with us here throughout the week. Ethan unfortunately could not be with us here today. He had there was a death in the family, and so we wanted to give him the night off. But Brooke, again, thank you so much for coming on in and be able to suffer here with me over the next little while. So without a doubt, let's be able to dive on in. So let's see. As we discussed, Chicago Blackhawks. Blues and the Blackhawks met last season 4 times, favoring the Blues with a 3-0-1 record. The Blues just dominating the scoreboard by a total score here of 12-4, led by Braden Shen, Pavel Buchnevich, and now former Blue David Perron, all scoring 4 points in 4 games. Perron leading the season series here with 3 goals. Really fast. Much thought here on last season. I mean, was there much else to be able to say other than just yikes? Or what's your thoughts here on last season?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yikes. I mean, you pretty much summed it up well. It wasn't just the Blues. It seemed like everybody just dominated the Blackhawks last season. They were bottom in the league in goals scored and goals against. I mean, there really wasn't much to be happy about last season, to be honest. So, yeah, like I said, just yikes. Bunch of yikes.
Just yikes. Yeah. Well, and yikes kept going, especially into the offseason, especially at the draft. You had just a couple of names going out, low-key guys, Dylan Strome, Kirby Dach, Dominic Kuberleak, Alex DeBrincat here to be able to name just a couple of guys. Thoughts here on losing some of these guys here?
To be honest, it wasn't surprising.
Okay.
It sucks, but it wasn't surprising. Let's just put it that way. Our new general manager, Kyle Davidson, kept talking about that he was going to make major changes and that major changes were needed. As much as it sucks to hear, I think every Hawks fan knew that. I mean, they've been out of the playoffs for 5 years and they keep getting the same exact result.
Right.
So, I mean, DeBrincat was in the trade rumors a little bit, obviously during the season, and then it kind of ramped up. I did think at the time that he probably would go. There was maybe a week off where I was like, I don't think he's going to go anywhere. But considering he was their best trade chip, it made sense. He was a 40-goal scorer, but it wasn't resulting in wins. So it's almost kind of like you got to take what you can get. It sucks to lose him. They're going to miss him a lot next year. He was probably the only bright spot of the Blackhawks season. So that wasn't surprising. I guess in that way, what I was surprised about was the return for him. It was a lot lighter than I thought. I really thought they would at least get a player or a prospect in return, and the fact that they only got 1 first-round pick was kind of disappointing. But apparently that was the best offer they got, and I guess you got to take what you can get. But yeah, a little disappointing on that front for sure, but I get it. I get the notion behind the trade.
Right.
Kuberleak and the rest of them, very expected though.
Yeah. And so for fans who may have, either forgotten here or whatnot, so the Blackhawks traded forward Alex DeBrincat to the Ottawa Senators for a first and a second round pick in 2022 and a third round pick in 2024. Then Kirby Dach, which to me was extremely surprising, was traded to the Montreal Canadiens for a 2022 first round pick at number 13 and a second round pick at number 66 and their picks here in the 2022 draft. So as you mentioned, Davidson mentioned that there was going to be some moves, and it's not overly surprising. He had no first rounders going into this draft, which to me is a little odd when you want to start a rebuild, but with no draft picks here in hand, again, he moves DeBrincat, he moves Doc. By moving them, he was able to secure 2 of his 3 first round draft picks and multiple picks thereafter. So, again, wasn't overly surprised. I get it. I think the combined capital that they were able to secure by moving both DeBrincat and Doc was good overall. Like when you do combine the 2 here of them, I still was a little bit surprised, of how little that it seemed like that they got back here for DeBrincat. So, Doc here from an outside perspective seems like that it was just odd that you would move a guy like that when he's so young. He really hasn't played very much, like in the grand scheme of things, 152 career games with 59 total points. So, I mean, other than to acquire draft capital and just completely gut the team, do you see a real reason behind this move?
Yes, I do. I was not surprised by Doc getting moved at all. I was surprised that they were able to get a first round pick for him. That's what I was surprised at. I didn't think he would be worth that much because of what he's accomplished so far. But yes, it made sense that he was moved. For one, he did have a wrist injury that caused him to miss a good amount of time, pretty much half of the season. And then when he did come back, some might say he was rushed back or maybe even rushed into the NHL in general. But I've always kind of said this about Doc. He was just, to me, wasn't always impressive for his draft stock. He was 3rd overall, and that's not his fault. That's where he was drafted. He is still talented, but a lot of the times I just really wasn't impressed, and I really didn't think he would amount really to anything. I thought he'd be maybe a good depth player, but just not the type that you would expect.
3rd overall.
Yeah, just not 3rd overall talent. So I do think he has talent, and I do think the Blackhawks liked him a lot. I think even Kyle Davidson said he thought he would have a better year next year. I think that's what most people think. That he's young, he's still got a lot to work through. But like I said, just some of the things I saw even from last year, which was probably his most full year. Just like I said, just he couldn't win a face-off. That was just, I think he has like a 30%. Wait, what was it? It was 34% career face-off win. It's just, and he had a hard time scoring at times. It didn't seem like all of the tools fit, but maybe it will on another team. I do think he needed a fresh start for sure. So I'm happy for him.
Do you think they rushed him along too quickly?
I honestly was never on that train. I know a lot of people think that, and maybe that is a plausible explanation. I never thought that though. I feel like if you're 3rd overall, you usually come pretty quickly and so you come to the league pretty quickly and you produce quickly. So I understand the notion behind it for sure, but I never really was on that. It's like, in my mind, players, you either have it or you don't in that spot. So at that point, I just didn't think he did, but I do think he will produce better in a different system for sure. I just don't think it was ever going to work here. Let's just put it that way. It didn't seem like it seemed early on that it wasn't a good fit. That's not a bad knock on Doc. Just some teams, for whatever reason, and players just don't gel correctly, but they do well in other systems. That's what I kind of think it is at this point.
Well, and maybe he'll have a little bit of a better time, with Montreal here right now, that he's going to be working, again, just in a completely different market. He'll be in a totally different system, and maybe it'll just be one that just gels better for him, and I certainly hope so. I really, really liked his potential upside of coming here into the league, and who knows here at this point. Dylan Strome here for me. This is a weird one. So Strome's departure really, like you said, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise because the Blackhawks have been trying to move him for the past 2 deadlines. Like, it's not been hush hush. It's been pretty obvious that they've been trying to move him. He was an impending restricted free agent at the end of the year that was simply not offered a qualifying offer and then just released into free agency. His qualifying offer was $3.6 million, which is something that it seems like the organization just was not willing to pay out. However, he then signs with the Capitals for a 1-year deal at $3.5 million. it just seems like it's extremely poor asset management here. Like, why would you not have signed him just to try and recapture something for the guy?
I get, that's very plausible, especially because from January on, he was a point per game player.
Yeah.
I'll say this even from my Blackhawks reporting, I've always been very hard on Dylan Strome because it seemed like he was either really good or really invisible, and there was no in between with him, and that was really frustrating because you saw he had it and then would just go really cold, and that was just kind of frustrating because of what he could be, and then he kind of proved that last year.
Right.
More consistently through January on, but I get letting him go. Like you said, it's always seemed like he did have one foot out the door all the time. And it never made sense that they didn't move him at that point because you take what you can get, honestly, for assets that you just don't want instead of just letting him walk for nothing. But according to Kyle Davidson, he did have that qualifying offer that they thought was a little steep. And they knew that by going to arbitration, because he had arbitration rights, that he would get more than that. And they wanted the flexibility. They wanted the salary cap flexibility. That could be a cop out. Who knows? But to be honest, I'm not really that concerned about Dylan Strome leaving just because it seemed like that was not a fit. He played well, but it just seemed early on, like, again, that just was not a fit no matter how good he was playing. And he did figure it out. And he did get better. And like you said, maybe it is a thing of he'll do better in the capital system where he is completely surrounded by elite players. That's what he needed to succeed a lot of times in Chicago. That's why he produced so well with Kane and DeBrincat. So we'll see if that works out better for him, if he can continue on that scoring pace in a different system. But yeah, it seems strange for sure, but I think they'll be okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you need to be able to be surrounded by players like DeBrincat and Kane to be successful, I mean, like, let's be real. If a guy knows how to be able to play, just skate here in general and can be able to pass the puck, he's going to be able to get points here with DeBrincat and Kane here on his line. So I hope that he gets maybe something a little bit better than third line minutes, although that may be what he's going to be getting here with that talent. But I mean, who knows? I mean, again, he needed to be surrounded by that elite talent. So with the team just in full rebuild, I mean, like you said, it just doesn't make sense to be offered a qualifying offer, but letting him go for nothing, it just seems like, I mean, you were damned if you do and damned if you don't. So it was, they just had to make a decision at some point.
Right.
And
I do think the team did try to move him, and it just became apparent, I think, that there was just no market for him for whatever reason. That still baffles me. Even they said last year there was just little to no market for him. I don't know why that is, but like you said, I do think they tried, and like you said, it just was more like damned if you do, damned if you don't. I tried, but that's just what it is.
Right. Well, and depending on how much the Hawks were actually asking for him here in return, because I mean, let's face it, I'm going to pump up his tires here as much as possible. If it's my guy, I'm going to sit here and say, look at how much he's producing. But other teams are not stupid. They're going to see he needs to be surrounded by elite players. And I'm not going to put this guy out there to play with my best players if he's potentially not going to be able to gel with him, or how long is it going to take for him to gel with them? I don't need to put him on a line. Say he comes to St. Louis, I don't need to be able to put him on a line here with, Tarasenko and Buchnevich to be successful. I've already got a guy in the system that can do that. I want to be able to provide depth. And if he's not going to be able to help carry a line, if he's just going to be the weight on that line, then no, I'm not going to, give you a first round draft pick or even a second for that point. So,
yeah. There is a lot of give and take with his game for sure. He can be good, but like you said, you put him anywhere else on a line, third and fourth line, he will be invisible. It's very specific.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch over here to Kuberleak. He came a little bit more of a surprise. What do you think here with him? I mean, his qualifying offer was at $4 million, which seemed a little high.
Yeah.
Here for me. Which I guess that's why he took the offer here with the Red Wings here at $2 million. So he's 2 years removed here of his 30-goal season, and since then he really hasn't been able to put up the same level of output. I was always worried about him coming into St. Louis of okay, this is somebody who we need to be able to watch, but then not really anything producing here for him. So are you upset about the loss here of him at this point?
Oh, Yeah, a little bit. Not because he had a bad season. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was really bad. And I think everyone knew that the Hawks would probably not retain him for that reason because it was that bad. And unfortunately, it happened to be a contract year on top of it. But I was a little bit upset because you could see he had the potential. Like he's got the goal scoring potential. And that seemed kind of like, although I understand that the qualifying offer was a bit steep for what his production was, and that's just the business side of things, but I do think he will turn it around. But last season was really bad. You can see it in his shot that he was just uncomfortable, not very confident, and it was kind of tough to watch for sure. But yeah, I think that might come back to bite the Blackhawks a little bit if he turns it around in Detroit. Then they just lost another really good goal scorer that they had found. It was like, okay, great. Because but unfortunately that is what it is. He didn't perform, and that's kind of what happens.
Well, and I'm wondering, I mean, it's no surprise, there was a lot that happened in Chicago on and off the ice here last season. And so I don't know if the product off the ice and the actions and the news here that surrounded the team all season long, just this dark cloud hanging over the team all season long, was a byproduct of what was being produced here on the ice. Players are just constantly under all this weight and scrutiny of, did you do that or did you do that, and what's going on here? And so, I'm sure these players are like, you know what, I just want to play hockey. I just want to play hockey. And so the fact that these guys are potentially moved out, I'm wondering if, they say a change of scenery can sometimes do wonders. And I'm sure a move out of a scene like Chicago can really do wonders here. And so for Kuberleak, I mean, it could be that exact same thing, where he could potentially refine his 30 goal potential, even if it's at 25, great. Detroit would end up finding, a great player here at this point. Montreal would have a great player here in Kirby Dach if he can be able to get stuff, his play here moving around. And the same thing, I don't think that Ottawa is going to find much surprise in the output of a player here like DeBrincat, but if he can be able to continue his play, then fantastic. They're going to be a dangerous team here this season. So ready to move on to new signings. Okay.
There's a lot of them. I think they made 10 free agent signings. So
so you guys have Peter Mrazek and Alex Stalock here in goal, Max Domi, Andreas Athanasiou, Dylan Sakura, Jack Johnson, Colin Blackwell, and Buddy Robinson. Boy, if that is not a fantastic 1970s name, I don't know what is.
Yep, I agree with that.
So let's look at this. I want to be able to break some of these, signings down here, but was there any signings that came here to Chicago that shocked you? I mean, was there anything that's like, well, that's interesting?
Here's the thing. Most of those players are not game-changing players. No. Like you said, they are just depth signings, but they're not ones that are going to move the needle too much, which is what they're hoping for. They don't want players that are going to move the needle too much, which made me shocked about Max Domi a little bit. I've always liked Domi as a player of what he could be. I know he's had a couple bad seasons, but he is a player that could move the needle of things. He's got top 6 potential. He was a 30 goal scorer at one point. That did surprise me a little bit, but I actually was really on board with that. And he's honestly growing on me more and more as he's been here. Obviously hasn't played a game with the Hawks. I don't know how that will translate, but that I think was more than a depth signing. They want him to play top 6 minutes. So we'll see if that turns out. But that to me was probably the biggest signing, because that's a pretty big signing for any team, I guess. I didn't think he would come to the Blackhawks for sure, considering he came from Carolina. Maybe a playoff team wanted him. I don't know. But yeah, that to me was the most surprising one. Yeah, absolutely. And both of those guys here, between Domi and Athanasiou, I personally think from an outsider's point of view, that those were two smart decisions. Both of these guys bring grit, competitiveness, speed. It's everything here that Davidson seems like that he's been preaching about this team here, just in regards to his rebuild. Both of these players have come from, like you said, come from a couple of different teams here, cemented a reputation here of just being a reliable middle 6, but then even at times top 6 players. And I think in Chicago, those two are going to be top 6 forwards. Especially if they choose to move on here from Taves and Kane, which we'll touch briefly here on that here after a little bit.
They're both on 1-year contracts, which means in all likelihood they could very well be moved here at the trade deadline here for additional assets. So if both players are playing well, thoughts here if you would move them, or I mean, do you think that you would want these players long term?
These sound like moves that the Blackhawks want to use at the trade deadline. I think they're hoping that
Okay.
they will play well to maximize their value for sure. I think they already know that Max Domi is a hot commodity at the trade deadline, as
Mhm.
we've seen. He's been on, what was it, 3 different teams in the past
Yeah,
5 years or something like that.
right.
So I think they always know that there's going to be interest in him. Anthony Siu, I think for sure he's kind of been had ups and downs throughout his career, but could be a good asset for sure with his speed. Um, so I think they do almost backwardly want them to succeed so they can trade them. But I do think they're like, you never know how the season will play out, how they'll fit. If they end up fitting so well that you see there could be a future there,
Hmm.
think it could make sense, but I don't see them staying long term at all. I don't think they want them to stay long term, as backwards as it sounds.
No, but the Blackhawks need to be able to keep the rebuild going here at this point. And like you said, by holding on to some of those assets, it may be it wouldn't make sense. It really wouldn't. I would much rather, if I'm in Davidson's seat, I would much rather try and get these guys to produce here as much as possible, build up their stock value, and then just sell, sell, sell. That's exactly here what I would want to be able to do. And that may be what they're trying to do here with another guy here in Colin Blackwell. He is a very, very interesting player, at a 2-year deal signed at $1.2 million here with the Hawks. He played with the Maple Leafs and the Seattle Kraken last year, putting up 20 points in 58 games. Not overly impressive, but his career face-off percentage hovers in around 58%, which I think is something that really, really, really appeals to the Blackhawks. And he could be a really interesting depth key piece with little to no risk. If a team comes asking here about him at 29, could be interesting. Again, 2 seasons, they could be able to choose to hold on to him. What do you see here really out of Blackwell?
I do think it was just a depth signing. They have
Okay.
little to no kind of center depth, to be honest, because they lost Strom, they lost Doc. Those were their 2 big centers, even though they weren't always successful in
Mm-hmm.
that role. But that was their depth. So now they got Taze, Tyler Johnson, and they have him now, which makes sense. You got to have some success at the dot. You can't just go in there willy nilly. So it makes sense. I don't see him being a trade deadline asset. I think most
Okay.
Blackhawks pundits say that once he signed a 2-year deal, pretty much means you don't want them to be. So I don't see it again being a long-term thing. I think just for now, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important to point out that there are no forwards on the Blackhawks that are signed beyond 2023 and 24. So they do want a clean slate here. I think he's a good placeholder for sure. And I think he has
Yeah.
potential to at least give them some good quality depth that's needed. Obviously in the dot and maybe just a veteran presence for sure. But yeah, I think that's a fine signing. I don't think it hurts them. And yeah, I think any team needs that.
He could be, in my opinion, I mean, they're 2 totally different styles, but he could be a player here like for the Blues of what Steve Ott was
Mm-hmm.
and Tyler Bozak here were.
Mm-hmm.
They're both brought in short-term deals. Ott here was traded for, Bozak here was signed, but both of those guys, really good here on the face-off, good veteran leadership, good presence here. And so it would not surprise me if Blackwell is ultimately re-signed and kept for multiple seasons here in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, especially here during this rebuild. So just I think it could be a very under the radar signing here for Chicago that
Mm-hmm.
fans could see for several seasons here moving forward.
Yeah, that could definitely make sense.
Awesome. Well, so let's touch here on the goaltending. Am I missing anybody here other than Mrazek and Stalock here at this point? Here in
No,
that for you guys?
no, you're
No.
not, because Kevin Lankinen is gone and Colin Delia is
Yeah.
gone. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they got.
So 2 brand new faces here: Peter Mrazek, Alex Stalock. Mrazek here was acquired, let's see, early July, when the Maple Leafs traded him and the 25th overall pick to Chicago for the 38th overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
That was the Maple Leafs saying, please, dear God, take Mrazek.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be interesting. I think he's going to be your number 1 starting goaltender with Alex Stalock here,
Mhm.
which I'm kind of surprised that he's still in the NHL at some point. So, what are your thoughts here on your new tandem here? Basically, I think was what it's going to be.
I did laugh when they got Mrazek for that first round pick. I was like, great, we got a first round pick. Bad news is, like you said, that's them basically saying, please take him. We can't do
Mhm.
this anymore. And we're like, oh
Right.
boy, here we go.
Hmm.
But I actually have always liked Mrazek. I actually think he's got a lot of potential. We saw it in Carolina, how good
Hmm.
he was there, and he just had a bad season, unfortunately. So
Right.
I do think he'll give him quality starts for sure. You need a goaltender in the NHL, and I think that's what Kyle Davidson even said when he got him. He was like, he's an NHL goalie. We need a
Hmm.
goalie. Like,
Right.
and again, don't think it's a long term thing. They do have some goalies in the pipeline. That Arvid Soderblom, Drew Comesso. Those will take a couple years to develop still. So he's just a good placeholder for now.
Hmm.
Again, don't think he's going to move the needle too much because it doesn't matter how great our goalies have been, and they have been phenomenal with Marc-Andre Fleury and Corey Crawford, and Lankinen was even really good too. But
Hmm.
with the team in front of him, it doesn't matter. So I think he will have a pretty good quality season for his sake. I think he actually will. So he's got a lot to prove. So we'll see. I'm actually okay with it. It doesn't hurt them. Whatever. Stalock again, think he's a quality backup goaltender.
Hmm.
From what I've talked to, from who I've talked to, from the Minnesota Wild, some of the writers at the Hockey Writers who cover the Minnesota Wild, they really were big fans of him when he was with Minnesota. So I know
Okay.
again he had a really bad year. He had missed some time with some health issues, but again, they just need backup. You just need a
Hmm.
quality backup. So for what they're doing, for what it's going to be tough next year. At
Oh
least
yeah.
yeah, it's going to be tough. So you know what? You need some quality people at least. It looks like they might get some quality with them. So I'm okay with it. And like I said, I think Peter Mrazek will actually have a good year.
Well, and they're going to have a heck of a time with the defense that's in front of them to help keep the puck here out of the back of the net. I mean, when you've got a guy, in Jack Johnson that you just signed here, I mean, which can only be just a depth signing here. I mean, what's interesting is that Daily Faceoff has Jack Johnson here as a second pairing defenseman. Yikes.
Uh-huh.
I'll just say yikes. But other than that, you've got McCabe with Seth Jones, Johnson with Murphy, which outside perspective, I love Connor Murphy. I love what he brings here to the ice here every single game. And then of
You're
course,
not alone.
oh, good
You're
is
not alone. We're all big fans of Murphy over here.
good. Good. I love to be able to hear that. He's the guys who come out to play, those second pairing minutes, but the hits, plus we'll put up a couple points here every now and then. It reminds me of a new version of the Blues, Barrett Jackman.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what it seems like is that Connor Murphy could potentially be the next Barrett Jackman kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you've got rounding out your third pairing here of Riley Stillman and Caleb Jones. Stalock and Mrazek are going to have a heck of a time with that defense in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
So, yikes.
Yeah. I know we keep saying yikes, but yeah,
Yes,
like I said, it's kind of unfortunate for them because, like you said, it doesn't matter if you had the perfect goaltender in there. Even if Vasilevsky, I don't think would even be able to mask that. It's just kind of the unfortunate state of hockey. You have to have a good team in front of you.
yeah. So let's see. So we just talked to with about the Arizona Coyotes here last episode. I'm very curious here on your opinion. When the Hawks play the Coyotes here this season, who do you think takes the season series?
I have to think the Blackhawks will, and I'm not saying this from a Blackhawks fan standpoint. There's something about this that sounds very fishy. Obviously, the Blackhawks don't want to be very good. We know that
Mm-hmm.
already from what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, I think it's very hard to lose when you still have Kane and Tays on your roster.
Yeah.
So I think that's and they still have Seth Jones and they still have Connor. They still have very valuable players in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, I think they'll be bad for sure. They were bad last year with them, but
Yeah.
I still don't think they're going to be as bad as the Coyotes. Like I said, they'll be bad though, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the same point in time, you've got guys here like Clayton Keller, Barrett Hayton, Nick Ritchie. You've got plenty of good talent, that's gone in defensively. You've got Gossespierre and Jacob Chikrin along here with Patrick Nemeth. I mean, these guys have added some good size here as well. So in my opinion, it's going to be a really interesting matchup on how these two teams are going to be able to pair up here against one another. As a, you don't want to say it's, it's the dive necessarily for Bedard or what have you here at this point, but I think those two teams would be very interesting just to kind of keep an eye on how their season series is playing out, especially here against one another.
Right.
So
yeah, for sure.
So let's touch here very briefly. The Hawks had quite a few draft picks here this year, 3 first-round draft picks. Again, after entering the draft with not a single first-round draft pick. What are your thoughts here on the draft class? Does anybody speak out here to you, or, does anybody, just say, hey, let's keep an eye here on this guy or anything like that?
They did focus a lot on center, especially through the second and later rounds, which was good because obviously they're going to need that. Their first round picks though intrigued me. Kevin Korchinski, the defenseman, is who they drafted at 7, which is the pick they got for DeBrincat. Apparently he had the highest upside. He was listed as having the highest upside in the draft. The Blackhawks really liked him. Kyle Davidson said, this was the guy I wanted all along. I said right from the beginning, this is my guy. And when we got the pick, I was like, we're going with this guy. So, and he just signed an entry level deal, and he's the only Blackhawks prospect as of right now from that draft class to sign a deal. So I think they're really high on him. It'll be interesting because that will fall heavily on the DeBrincat trade. If he doesn't pan out, the DeBrincat trade is going to look like a fail. So they're really putting a lot of hope and expectation into this guy. I think he'll be good. A lot of the scouts are really high on him. And then Frank Nazar is who they drafted in the first round for Kirby Dach with the Kirby Dach pick that they got. He looks like he will be a really fun signing for them just by watching him at training camp videos I've seen. He looks like he'll be a great depth player. He's got really good hands, really good shot. I think they might have some hidden gems there, I think, in the first round for sure. Obviously, we won't know for a few years if that will pan out, but for right now, it looks like it could be worth it. But like I said, we don't know yet.
Yeah, Nazar was one that I was really hoping would, for some reason, just let him fall here to St. Louis. He was a guy that I was really, really trying to keep an eye here on, and I was slightly upset, maybe a little more than slightly, that he ultimately ends up going to Chicago here. But Chicago's got some really interesting prospects that are coming up. Drew Commisso here, like you were saying, I think would be an interesting one. But just definitely here, like from this draft class, Nazar, I think, is like the top one here at this point for fans to be able to keep their eye here on.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll be a Chicago fan favorite. He plays very like Chicago-y, just kind of feisty, talented.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so we have previewed the offseason here with a lot, with the additions. We've looked here at the subtractions. Is there any other like offseason acquisitions or offseason dealings that have happened here in Chicago that you want to be able to touch on before we start looking here forward here to this coming season?
Any more acquisitions?
There was the famous Jack Johnson acquisition.
Yes, there was. He is just a guy, like we said. It's fine. Like, it's good if you have a signing that you don't feel either positive or negatively towards. He's just a guy. He will be there. And he is a Stanley Cup champion. So guess what? He's got some cred here now. But it is an interesting signing. Yeah. But it is an interesting signing because they have 14 defensemen signed on for next year. A lot of them are going to be in Rockford, which is their AHL team. But it seems a little counterproductive to sign more defensemen when we have a lot of defensemen in the pipeline. But I get it. They just want a placeholder for now until the defenseman develops. So, yeah, that was kind of interesting. I didn't expect them to sign another defenseman. Other than that, Dylan Sakura was probably a weird one because he was with the team a couple years ago, back in 2020. He was traded away. Then now he's back. So the Blackhawks do love their reunions, but that's fine. That's another depth forward. I think he'll spend most of his time in Rockford, but may see some time depending on injuries, I think. So that'll be interesting to watch too. But again, that seemed like a Blackhawks move. I've always liked Sakura, but it seemed like another okay, here we go again. Another reunion.
That's not a big deal.
And then of course Caleb Jones and Philip Khrushchev were re-signed. Those were the only 2 players that got qualifying offers. And those I think were great signings by them. 1-year deals, really cheap, perfect for the rebuild.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it here. So, All right, so let's take a look here going into next season. So the Blues and the Blackhawks will play each other 4 times. The first of which here will be November 16th. So not too terribly far here, like into the season, but the 4 matchups are all spread throughout the entire season. The next matchup here is not going to be towards the very end of the calendar year, and then here in February and in March here at this point. So thoughts, predictions, anything, if you had to guess, is it another, in your perspective, 0-3-1 season? Do you think the Hawks will be able to potentially squeeze something out?
Do you know what I was thinking about this today? The Blackhawks are expected to be so bad. I think they will be bad. On paper, they are bad. But it's always the teams that you go win the NHL thinking they are going to stink so bad that end up not being very bad. So I do think the Blackhawks will be bad, very bad. But I don't know if they will be dumpster fire bad. So we'll see. If you have a lot of kids, and there will be a lot of rookies playing this year trying to prove their worth. And when you get a lot of kids that play hard and have something to prove, sometimes wins can result from it. Yes. So if I'm thinking of like seasons between, or just kind of results between the Blackhawks and Blues, I still have the Blues. It's painful to say the Blues, I think, will have the edge. But maybe with the Blackhawks young kids, they might be able to squeak out one win. I'm not very hopeful, but I think it could happen.
At least one. Okay. Well, I don't think I can be able to be overly upset if you guys were to take one victory. I won't be overly upset here at that point, but maybe we can be able to get a lot of games here up against Mrazek and Stalock. I don't think that these guys are going to be overly, like you said, big barn burners here at that point, but I don't know. I think we can be able to easily sweep the whole series 4-0-0 here at that point. Maybe be able to get a shutout or two.
Well, like I said, they still got Kane and Taze on this roster. Anything can happen, I guess.
Yep, and that goes in here to my next point. So you guys have multiple one-year deals. So let's take a look here and see if you think that these players will be on the team by the time, day after trade deadline. Okay, so we'll start here with the captain, Jonathan Toews. Is he on the roster the day after the trade deadline?
Yes, I think he will be. I think he alluded to the fact that if he plays well, there will be a trade market for him at the deadline. He's got a $10.5 million cap hit, same as Patrick Kane. It's kind of a steep cap hit there, but I do believe that's a possibility, but I don't see it happening at this point. I think he will remain a Blackhawk through the trade deadline.
Okay. And then we both said that Athanasiou and Max Domi are likely gone here at that point. It doesn't really make much sense. Both players here are at $3 million. I don't see how a team really wouldn't acquire here one of them, or be at least in the market here for one of them, especially, those playoff bound teams.
Yes.
Jack Johnson at 35 years old, even at $950,000, I can't really see a large market here for them. But Jack Johnson,
I see him staying. I don't see him being a trade deadline asset.
Okay. And then I think the number one question, Patrick Kane.
We've been going back and forth. Our Blackhawks team has all season long. And at this point, I'm going to say I think he will be a Blackhawk. I think there's a lot of sense to be made that he shouldn't be a Blackhawk at this point. He's still an elite player, one of the best in the league, and does deserve to win. And he's not going to win on this team. It's just a fact of the matter right now. It's a hard truth. But at this point, I feel like the Blackhawks have given him every reason to want to get out. And I feel like this season, with losing DeBrincat and Strome, who were his 2 favorite line mates, I felt like that was like the biggest nudge to him, get out. And he's still staying. And I feel like it'd be easier to move in the offseason than the trade deadline. According to his agent, there's no decision that's been made, but if he does get moved, it will be at the deadline. I still don't see it happening, though. Like I said, I think they've given him every reason to leave, and he hasn't wanted to leave. And that's a testament to him. He loves the Blackhawks. He loves the team. He's got a lot of loyalty here. So, yeah, I think, like I said, it makes a ton of sense. He's going to have a market at the trade deadline for sure, but I don't see it happening anymore.
Well, and he has been heavily rumored here right now between, and I don't like this, the Dallas Stars, which I don't think makes a ton of sense. They're a lot farther away from securing any sort of a Stanley Cup here than what the other team that's been rumored here, and the Edmonton Oilers, which I can't even fathom a line of, McDavid, Kane, and Kane.
Yeah.
Like I cannot. The danger that these two, both Kanes, McDavid and Draisaitl and Yamamoto. I mean, any single, this whole lineup would be just insane. And it makes sense, if they were able to retain, say, 50% salary here on Patrick Kane, move him in a deal that would net, I don't know, Tyson Barrie. They don't necessarily need the point producing defenseman. They're going to be getting a guy at that point in Kane that can be able to just score right up front, plus, maybe a draft pick or two, plus, like our prospect or whatever. I think a move to Edmonton makes all the sense in the world here for him. Right. So, bearing anything else, that's where my money here is.
Here's the thing. I think it's important to note that he does have a no movement clause. Anything obviously is up to his discretion. I mean, from a fan standpoint, you're thinking if you're in Kane's mind and you're getting a chance to play with McDavid and Draisaitl and Evander King, you're thinking, heck yeah, that sounds amazing. Who actually have a chance at the Stanley Cup. Putting Patrick Kane on there would certainly help them, especially with their goaltending issues. But yeah, like I said, I think that'll be very tough for Kane. But I do think if Kane wanted to leave at the deadline, which I do think is still a possibility, even though I don't see it, that the Blackhawks would do right by him and would retain a lot of salary just to move him if that's what it took. I do think they would make that happen. So it is an interesting one, but it seems like Edmonton's the one team in all of the rumors, even dating back to June, that have been the most aggressive. So we'll see. But yeah, like you said, I would be terrified if I was another team and saw Connor McDavid and Patrick Kane coming at me. I'd be very scared.
Well, yeah. And to me, I mean, does it necessarily mean that he wants to go and win another cup? Winning 3 cups here already, fantastic. Yeah, he could be able to want to go for a 4th one, but I could also see, and again, call me crazy here with this, and this could just simply just be pure nostalgia, and him just wanting to, quote, go home and be able to play in Buffalo. There's all the sense in the world that could make here as well. I mean, Buffalo, I think, has, plenty of stock as of prospect assets and whatnot that could really be able to entice the Chicago Blackhawks to be able to acquire him. But would it make sense for a team here like Buffalo to move a lot of young players who are on the verge of helping them become relevant here again? Right. I don't think it makes sense, but of course, there's plenty of fans who say, "Oh, bring Kane back home."
Yes. I think it sounds nostalgic, I think, for any fan to go back home. I think they say the same thing about Austin Matthews and the Coyotes. Like, it'd be great. But at this point, if Kane does move, I think it will be to only a Stanley Cup contending team. I don't think they will give them to, although Buffalo, they were pretty good towards the end of the year. Maybe they'll be better. I don't see them being a Stanley Cup, but you never know. Stanley Cup favorite, but you never know, I guess, in hockey. But yeah, I think it sounds nice. I don't see it being realistic, though.
I think we can both agree. Don't move him to Nashville. Don't move him to Tampa Bay. Other than that, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, Nashville for sure, because obviously there's a lot of bad blood between Nashville and the Blackhawks. Yeah, and Tampa, obviously, yeah, because they're the champions and we're sick of seeing everyone win.
Yep, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So, okay, Brooke, I just want to thank you so much here for coming in here with us. Be able to help just break down this summer series, be able to give fans here just a little bit of an insight as far as what's been going on here to here, like with the Chicago Blackhawks. Give the listeners, where can they be able to find you? What you've been working on? Like what's some stuff we can be able to look forward here from you?
Okay, so you guys can find me at thehockeywriters.com on the Blackhawks page. You can find all of my Blackhawks articles. I'm actually working on a Max Domi article as we speak, so it felt like the perfect time to bring them up. So you can look for that this coming week. And you can also find me on Twitter. My username is Brooke_LoFo, LOFO. So you can find all of my hockey tweets there. I'm very active on Twitter, so that's where you can find me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, again, thanks so much here for coming on in here with us. Listeners, thank you so much here. This has been the Blue Note podcast, part of the Believe Network. Again, you can be able to find me here on Twitter as well at M_Meyer3 and Ethan at Ethan Carter SW. So tune in next time here with us as we just break down the Stanley Cup champions, the Chicago Avalanche. Again, we will be recording here next Sunday and be releasing here it on Monday. So thanks again here to the fans, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for watching Believe. You can find more great content at Believe.com. That's BLEAV.com. Do you believe?